Welcome to ski flying. Now, be warned, this is some of the most fun you can have in your airplane, especially in the wintertime. This video is really just an introduction into the world of flying on skis. There's a lot we could talk about and a lot we could show you in airplanes, but this video is designed just to give you a brief overview of some helpful information that is good to know before you embark on this new type of flying. Now, while there's no endorsement required, or actually any training required legally before putting your airplane on skis and going out and flying on snow, it is of course a great idea to go ahead and put in a little bit of time and effort on the ground studying, as well as some good flight instruction time with a CFI on board to get used to flying your airplane on skis, and it can certainly help avoid some costly mistakes and make the overall experience a lot more enjoyable. Plus, your insurance company is probably going to want you to get a little bit of time with a CFI before going out on your own. Now, like we said, there's a lot to talk about here, but think of this short video as just an introduction and a quick little preview of our online ski flying course coming to flyatmikealpha.com here in 2021. Click on the link in the description below for details on that. Today, we'll simply introduce you to the different types of skis that are out there and available for your aircraft. We'll talk a little bit about takeoffs, just briefly about the landing procedures, as well as taxiing around and how to move your aircraft around on the snow and ice. Let's jump into something fun here to start with and start talking about takeoffs. Now, takeoffs in ski flying are one thing that remains relatively constant regardless of the type of surface you're on or the type of snow that you're on. Snow has a large effect on what kind of landing you'll be doing, and the type of surface, whether it's slanted, a glacier, a lake, all of that, has a big impact on your landings, not so much on your takeoffs. Anytime you're taking off on skis, it's going to really be the same idea. A soft field takeoff is what it's most similar to on your wheeled airplanes. If you think back to our online tailwheel course on our website, the idea here in a soft field takeoff is to keep that tailwheel or keep the tail of the aircraft as close to the ground as possible throughout the takeoff roll. That's going to put as much lift as possible on the wings of the aircraft, making it as light as possible and decreasing the drag of the snow against the skis. The whole problem here is that the weight of the aircraft is pushing the skis down into the snow, causing much more drag than wheels would on pavement. What we're ultimately trying to achieve here is to get the aircraft up onto snow step, or basically in float plane terms, when the floats of an aircraft get onto step. So we can see this float plane here accelerating, the bow of the float rises, and then you can see the float going from displacement, from sinking in the water, all the way up to riding on top of the water. We're trying to do the same thing with our skis. We don't want our skis to be sinking into the snow. What we're ultimately describing is here, where you can see a lot of weight on the skis and soft snow pushing the skis down, causing lots of drag. Perhaps you'd be taxiing or trying to take off with your tail too high, or in this case, it's just very powdery snow. Compared to this, where you can see much more of the weight is supported on the wing, the tail's nice and low, trying to keep the tail as low as possible, keeping your angle of attack as great as possible to produce as much lift as you can on that takeoff roll, making the aircraft a little bit lighter, taking the drag off the skis and allowing the aircraft to accelerate, and then of course, staying in ground effect and climbing away at a nice safe speed at Vx or Vy once you've achieved that. We can see here where the tail of the aircraft, well, is just a little bit higher than we would want it to be. Now, why is that? Perhaps you're trying to get better visibility. Perhaps you're taking off down glacier, and just that optical illusion, you want to go ahead and raise that tail a little bit more to try to look down the glacier, look at that ground that's kind of falling away in front of you, that's descending in front of you. So it might be a natural reaction taking off downhill to actually want to raise the tail too high. Ultimately, we're trying to just skim that tail wheel just above the surface of the snow. If it's too low and digs into the snow, that will cause drag and extend the takeoff roll. If it's too high, we're going to be putting too much weight onto the skis, causing too much drag and extending our takeoff run a lot longer than it needs to be. If you're already flying on floats, you probably know this as finding the sweet spot on step. Some of the more common mistakes for the new ski plane pilot will be trying to take off or land with the tail too high, trying to get back to that more familiar wheel landing attitude from flying on wheels that doesn't work so well on skis, potentially forgetting to use flaps, a lift flap setting for takeoff, and not using an abort point, potentially ignoring it, or just forgetting to set one in the first place altogether. You should always have an abort point on skis, whether it be a time-based abort point or a actual physical point in space down your runway, so to speak, to stop your takeoff if you're not off of the snow by then. Very easy to be taking off downhill and think, any minute now, I'll get airborne, and, well, you start burning up a lot of runway. Perhaps you get into a area that you did not really scope out or lay tracks down in the first place to really know what the quality of the snow is. And there could be some serious obstacles down there, like crevasses, rocks, frozen ice chunks that could rip off a ski or tear off your landing gear, all sorts of bad things. So stick to an area that you know well, and make sure when you're scoping out your landing area to scope out a much larger area than you think you need, because you may need a lot more room on takeoff. And finally, the last common mistake made is when you're getting out of the airplane, make sure you have snowshoes, and don't sit too close to the airplane when your buddy drops you off to go ahead and get those camera shots, because snow hurts. Next up, we're going to talk about landings. Now, this is just a very high-level overview of landing on snow with skis. There's a lot of different types of snow and different types of ice that you can be landing on a ski-equipped aircraft, and a lot of different factors that go into it depending if you have wheel skis or straight skis and etc. We'll cover all that stuff in the online course, but for now, let's just cover the basics. We're going to break it down into 5 simple steps. The first step is going to be a pass over our intended landing area that we'll go ahead and call the recon pass or the survival pass. What we're doing here is flying over at 500 to 1,000 feet AGL to locate any sort of cabins, roads, rivers, anything nearby that if something goes wrong and we get stuck out here, which there's a good likelihood of getting stuck out here, well, then you're going to want to know what is your way out. You're going to be doing this on foot in the cold. You're going to need to have a good plan of what is your way out to help, because help may not be coming to you. So that's our first idea here, flying around the general area, getting an idea of what is available to us if something goes wrong and what is the easiest way to hike out. Next up, we're going to have the drag pass. So we're going to go ahead and fly over about 20 feet or so AGL, 20 to 50 feet, whatever you're comfortable with, and try to get down low to observe any sort of obstacles or any hazards up close to the surface. Now, if you have slightly flat lake conditions or you're not quite sure, well, you could go ahead and start this at, say, 200 feet or 100 feet or 50. You'll eventually want to get down to very low to the ground in that 10 to 20 foot range, so it may take several passes, because you want to make sure that there are no obstacles, there are no big snow drifts, there are no covered up rocks, anything like that you may be missing from 50 feet away. Good eyesight is really key here. Clean plexiglass also really helps. The third step is going to be the rolling pass. So we're going to actually go ahead and land on the surface now and keep it rolling, keep the power in there, dragging those skis through the snow, laying down some tracks, keeping a little bit of weight on the mains or on the skis, but we're not going to stop and we're not going to get so slow that we cannot just add full power and pop back off and get out of there. This isn't just one single pass. It could be if conditions are really great and you've been into that spot before and it's really well known and you know everything about it and there's no obstacles and all that great stuff, but this pass could be duplicated many times to lay down more and more tracks to help firm up the snow, to continuously get an idea of what's going on. And keep in mind, you're going to want to lay tracks far in excess of what you need to land. 2 to 3 times as much as what you need to land. You should have quite a bit of room to work with when you're flying on skis anyways, and you're going to want to do that because you're going to want to have tracks long enough to take off in. At least 1.5 times what you think it will take you to take back off once you do make a full stop there. So after you make that first drag pass through your tracks, you could come back around and start laying more tracks, or you could simply go ahead and jump onto step 4 and then lay more tracks after that. Step 4 is going to be the inspection pass. So as we fly back over, we're not going to fly directly over top of our tracks. We're going to slightly offset to where we had just touched with our skis, perhaps 50 feet or 100 feet to the side, so we can look, doesn't matter, left or right, whatever works for you. You may try doing it both ways, so that you can have different lighting conditions and observe the tracks from different sides. So you may go ahead and fly upwind with the tracks on your left and then fly downwind with the tracks on your left again, observing them from both sides, allowing the sun to hit them from different angles, and really inspecting for things like overflow. If your tracks were getting dark, indicating that there's actually liquid water underneath that snow that could get you stuck. Or if there's any sort of obstacles, how deep those tracks are, any sort of cracks, crevasses, anything that doesn't look quite right that you don't want to be walking around on or putting your airplane into, that's the time to figure it out. So after we've done that inspection pass, we then have the option to go ahead and lay some more tracks, or go ahead and come back and land, preferably uphill, with a full stop into those tracks. Now let's take a quick little detour here to talk about overflow. So overflow is when you have a nice lake and the water freezes on the surface and then it snows and all that snow weighs down the ice, eventually pushes on that ice so much that it sinks and cracks. And now that that ice is below the waterline, well, the water's going to seep up through the cracks and you're going to get liquid water beneath the snow. And when you land in that snow, well, you're going to get stuck in that really slushy water because it's going to freeze once it's exposed. So what we're looking for here as we fly over and lay down those tracks, not so much on these hilltops, but if we were landing on a frozen lake, we would be looking for those tracks to get dark as water seeps into those tracks. And it is important to note that it can take up to 5 minutes for water to wick its way up through the snow and actually darken up. So here you could lay down a set of tracks and perhaps come around for a full stop if everything looked good. On a lake or anywhere there could be liquid water nearby, overflow present, and it's not just exclusive to lakes, but anywhere that water could exist underneath the snow, you're going to want to give it time and perhaps use that time to lay down a few extra sets of tracks to really know that you're not going to be landing in that soft slushy stuff that will definitely get you stuck. Now let's say you made all those passes, everything looks great, and you're ready to go ahead and make a full stop landing. It doesn't have to be a full stop. If you touch down and you start getting slow and you say, oh, I don't know about this, there's really no wind out here, I'm going slightly uphill, I feel like I might get stuck, well, think about going ahead and making that 180-degree turn and getting back out of there. If you don't have the power to take off straight ahead, and perhaps there's no headwind to really help you, making the 180-degree turn to take off downhill could be the best thing. Make sure that you're not making that turn too tight with too much centrifugal force, tipping the airplane outboard. That's a good way to get that outboard ski stuck. It's a good way to break off a ski by making a turn too tight or too fast. So if you want to make a fast turn, make it real wide. If you want to make a tight turn, keep the speed slow, but realize the slower you go, the more likely you are to get stuck. Be sure you know everything about your entire operating area, because we can see we left tracks here on the left side of the screen, but if we had made that turn any wider, perhaps because we're trying to make it faster, we might be encountering that snowdrift there. So keep up your situational awareness, know everything that is going on around you. In case you do have to get out of there, have lots of plan Bs, have plan B, C, D, and so on. If you don't like it, make that 180, add full power, take off, and go find a different place to land. Now we'll cover a lot more about landings in the course, but in an effort to not make this video an hour plus long, we're going to go ahead and skip on into taxing now. So taxing is a little bit different on skis than it is with wheels, and there's just a few basic principles we're going to go ahead and cover here, whether you're on regular straight skis or skis with wheel dollies, or if you're potentially on hydraulic wheel skis, well, that makes life a lot easier, right? So when we're on any type of a hydraulic wheel ski or wheel penetration ski where we have a tire touching the ground, well, assuming that's good dry ground, not ice, not snow, well, it works just like when you're taxiing on wheels, right? We can use differential braking to turn the aircraft. Except for when we get onto snow here, whether you have wheels or wheel penetration skis or straight skis, it's going to be a little bit different. So once we are on snow and or ice and we're just skidding along here, we're going to be relying much more on our air rudder, and we have to remember that we basically have no brakes. The only way we're going to stop the aircraft is the friction on the skis. Now, this does work, especially in snow, and taxiing on a nice layer of 4, 5, 6 inches of snow or more can be really nice around the airport if you're trying to get from the hangar out to the runway. Now, if it's really icy out, it could be a lot worse, because those skis on the bottom, we're going to talk about all the different ski types and construction here in just a few minutes, but on the bottom of all skis, there's going to be some sort of skeg or runner or some sort of strip, typically 2 strips even, and those will be either steel or plastic, but the idea of those strips is to help the ski track straight. The problem is, it helps the ski track straight. It doesn't let you turn very well, and if you can imagine how figure skates would be on ice, well, those steel strips on the bottom of your ski work very much the same way when you're trying to taxi on ice. So, let's look at just taxiing on regular snow. When we want to get going somewhere, well, we just apply a little bit of power, break through the friction, and we can start taxiing forward. If we want to make a turn, well, we have some friction from our tail wheel, or tail ski if it's so equipped, to help us make that turn, but ultimately the air rudder is going to really come into play here. So when we want to turn the airplane, we'll want to actually allow the airplane to decelerate or perhaps even come to a stop. That way we can use a large burst of power with full rudder application to actually use the air rudder most effectively. The problem is if we're scooting along at 6, 8, 10 miles an hour and we want to go ahead and turn the airplane and we press on the rudder pedal, Well, the air rudder is not really doing a whole lot with 8 or 10 miles an hour worth of airflow over it. If we want to add a whole bunch of power to make it more effective, well, now all of a sudden the airplane's doing 15, 20 miles an hour, and our radius of turn increases drastically. We have no brakes, and if you misjudge anything, you might be mowing down some taxiway lights. Not a fun day. So, allow the airplane to slow down and then use a large burst of power with full rudder application to turn the aircraft in the direction you want. Once you're turned in the direction you want, then you can go ahead and use a normal power setting to taxi along nice and slowly. Slow is the biggest key here when you're taxiing. Now, it could also take multiple rounds of this procedure of a large burst of power, turns the airplane a little bit, then it starts tracking straight on you, so you go powered idle, you allow the airplane to come to a stop, then you go ahead and use another large burst of power to try to get the airplane turning again. It could be several rounds of that, so plan well ahead and do not allow the airplane to get going faster than you're comfortable with. So cautious with those bursts of power. If there's any doubt in your mind, it's icy, the airplane's not really slowing down for you very well, it's not turning very well, simply go ahead and shut down, get out, and pick up the tail and turn the aircraft as you need to. That's going to happen. There is no way around it, especially when we get into this next situation here, which we're going to start talking about, which is taxiing on a mix of snow and pavement. Obviously, the pavement has a lot more drag than the snow, so every time that ski touches the pavement, it's going to want to turn the airplane. You can very easily get turned in the direction you don't want to go. The only positive here is, because of the drag of that pavement, if you're only going a safe speed like 5-6 miles per hour, well, the airplane will come to a stop pretty easily, so you'll be able to actually get out and turn the airplane before you mow down a taxiway light or hit somebody else's airplane. Now, the other side of the coin is if you're going to be skimming across ice and snow and pavement, keeping your speed at a decent speed, 5, 6, 8 miles an hour, no faster, but keeping momentum in the aircraft can help keep the airplane gliding forward. Friction will actually increase on that pavement right as you get really slow in that 2-3 mile an hour range. So keeping a little bit of forward motion there can really help you tracking straight, especially if you're in a big wide open area. There's no obstacles around you like other airplanes or runway edge lights, taxiway lights, stuff like that. It is not uncommon to use wheel dollies, which simply slip into the side of a straight ski and then are rotated to support the weight of the aircraft on this tiny little tire. It's not uncommon to use those to taxi out from your hangar out to the actual runway or the ski strip, and then go ahead and remove them to the side and then taxi out onto the snow or where there is more snow to actually get going. They certainly help a lot getting the airplane in and out of the hangar. If you don't have wheel dollies and you're on straight skis in a hangar, well, you can drag the airplane in or out. It's not preferable, kind of tears up the floor and the skis a little bit. So wheel dollies really help. If you don't have wheel dollies, then, well, simply shoveling some snow underneath the skis can also really help create a nice sliding surface to move the airplane out of the hangar onto the rest of the snow like you see here. And same thing when you're putting the airplane back in the hangar, you might have to shovel a little bit of snow in there to push it in. The only problem with that is, well, it actually slides really well. It doesn't stop very well when you're pushing the airplane back into the hangar. If there's any sort of humps, it's kind of hard to get the airplane over that hump of snow as you get in and out of the hangar. Plus, it melts and leaves a lot of water everywhere, if you're lucky enough to have a heated hangar. You may think that's not a problem at all, except that water will typically, in your heated hangar, pool towards the door and then get very cold right at the edge of the door there, and then freeze the door to the ground, or potentially form a little ice dam so that when you open the door, it'll freeze, and then as you try to close the door, there's a bunch of ice that you have to chip away before you can actually get the door back down. Moral of the story, if you're on straight skis, wheel dollies are a good investment. If you're going to be taxiing on lovely, wonderful snow, stick to just skis. Get rid of those wheel dollies. They're not helping you at all. If you're taxiing on a mix of pavement and ice and snow, wheel dollies can certainly help. Keep the speed at a steady speed to keep going straight so you're not getting jerked around by that pavement, 5-6 miles an hour, 8 at the most, if you are going over that mix of snow and ice and pavement, so that you can kind of skim over that and you don't get excess friction from the pavement. If you are losing control of the airplane at any point, quickest way to shut down the engine, mags off, pull out the mixture. Don't pull the mixture and wait for the engine to shut down, just kick off the mags and the airplane will come to a stop. Well, as soon as it's going to come to a stop, there's really nothing you can do at that point. So manage your energy, clear the area, just like being on floats. Before you fire up, you look at the area and you figure out where you're going to put this airplane because you have no brakes. So you better have a clear place to put it. The airplane should stay in place when you fire up, even though you don't have brakes. There is a good bit of friction between the skis and the snow or ice, even if it is straight up ice. But under the right conditions, if it's nice glare ice and you fire up even at idle, the airplane may keep on trucking, so be ready to kick off those mags and pull that mixture if need be. When you're taxiing to turn around for takeoff, well, it might be tempting to use a big burst of power and really swing that tail around and throw snow everywhere and look super cool. You can very easily side load the gear on a ski plane. There's a lot of force on the side of that ski, and if that thing buries itself in snow, just like burying a float on a step turn, you can damage the landing gear, damage the ski on your aircraft, possibly tweak the fuselage where the landing gear attaches. So be cautious not to be going too fast, and be cognizant of what kind of centrifugal force you have, or centrifugal force you have in that turn as you make, say, a 180-degree turn to go ahead and turn around for takeoff. If you take away nothing else from this section of the video, just remember, practice for your very first time in a very big, wide, open area. And anytime you change surface types, so perhaps you practice for your very first time in a big, wide open, lightly snow-covered area, that's great. As soon as that melts a little bit and you see a little bit of pavement showing through, all bets are off. It's a new surface. I don't care if you've flown 20 flights on skis, all with nice, light, snow-covered taxiways and ramp areas. Well, now it's something totally different. You're back to square one. It's just like your very first day on skis. So every time that surface changes, the aircraft's going to behave differently. Until you get the experience, make sure that every time you're on a different surface, that you're giving yourself a big, wide open area to experiment with, and go slow. Manage your energy, use large bursts of power at slow speed to make that air rudder effective, to turn your aircraft. Don't hesitate to shut the engine down and get out and push your airplane around where it needs to be. That's just part of ski flying. It is a lot of work. Now let's go ahead and talk different types of skis available for your aircraft. 3 types. We've got wheel penetration skis, we've got straight skis, and we have hydraulic wheel skis. What are the pros and cons of each of them here? Well, in this case, if you have a lightweight aircraft, and especially an underpowered airplane, so something like a nice lightweight Cub, you want really good performance, well, you might go with straight skis. You want to keep it nice and light, or if you're underpowered, you need to keep the weight down and get good performance. Straight skis are good, they're cheap. Here we have wheel dollies, which bolt on temporarily to those straight skis to make the aircraft a lot easier to move around on pavement and move around in and out of the hangar until you get to a snow-covered surface. The next kind of in between straight skis and hydraulic wheel skis would be wheel penetration skis. That's what these are. And the idea here is the tire is still touching the ground. It protrudes below the ski. The ski is just mounted with this little bracket that gets welded onto the oleo type gear, or if you have spring steel gear, you can actually bolt it on just with bolts. And what's nice about this is you get to actually have a tire touching the ground and supporting the weight of the aircraft, so you can use differential braking, you can actually use your brakes on pavement, and if you're operating from a plowed surface that's pavement, or even plowed gravel, this can be really nice. You have that little wheel in back there to support the back of the ski so it doesn't get chewed up, dragging on gravel or pavement. The problem is the tire is protruding through the ski. There's a little bit less flotation for the ski because of that cutout for the tire, and that tire is protruding down into the snow, causing extra drag. Plus it weighs more because you have the weight of the tire, the brake assembly, the caliper, and all that, plus the weight of the ski. So a little bit heavier, but a nice compromise if you are going to be operating on dry pavement as well as snow-covered surfaces. Lastly is the best of both worlds aside from the weight issue. We have hydraulic wheel skis here. A hydraulic cylinder that you're going to either pump or perhaps have an electric switch in the cockpit to actuate will actually move the ski forward and back and also down underneath the tire so that the tire is resting on top of the ski to get the tire out of the way of the snow, so you have a nice clean bottom, a nice efficient surface so there's no extra drag. You might even have a setup like this from Airglass where a door comes in and forces the tire up to force the aircraft up, and then that door closes, so you have good flotation, very little drag. The problem is, well, the cost, and then the weight, because we have hydraulics now involved as well. All of these skis, regardless of what they are, nowadays are covered in this plastic on the bottom, which is UHMW. It's a nice low friction plastic coating that can easily be replaced if it wears out. You'll also have skegs, so you'll have these strips running down the side, either in plastic or steel. Steel is great and durable, but it generates a little bit more heat and is more likely to freeze to the snow and ice and get you kind of stuck there after landing. The plastic is less likely to do that, but it's not quite as durable as the steel. All of these skis nowadays are built as FRP, fiber reinforced plastic, so some sort of fiberglass, carbon fiber, Kevlar, basically vacuum infused with vinyl ester resin or epoxy resins. And then there's a few metal parts and pieces that go on to tie them all together, maybe attaching the metal skegs on the bottom. Keep in mind, dissimilar metals will cause corrosion, and keep a close eye on those brackets that attach the skis to the aircraft if you're mixing things like carbon fiber and metal brackets, and especially any sort of dissimilar metals between steel, aluminum, and all that sort of stuff. They're also gel coated typically when they're going to be coming out of these molds. Some of them could be painted or clear coated, but gel coat's pretty common now and looks nice and shiny with these plastic skis, fiber reinforced plastic. You can still get metal skis, but wood is pretty much all gone away, and we're just left with either metal or the more common plastic or fiber reinforced plastic, which is a fancy way of saying fiberglass, carbon fiber, and Kevlar. That is our 3 main types of skis. And that is where we'll go ahead and end this video. There's a lot more to talk about. We'll cover everything else, lots of other stuff in the online course at fly@mikealpha.com. But this video is getting a little bit long, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I don't think I need to give you guys any more reasons to get out there and try out ski flying. I mean, just look at this shot. Look at the places you can go on skis. I promise you, the one thing I can absolutely promise you, if you put skis on your airplane, you will have fun, provided you have the right training and the right aircraft for it. Other than that, guys, you know what to do. Any questions on this thing, go ahead and leave them in the comments below, or go on to fly@mikealpha.com, click on the Ask a Question tab at the top of the page there, and we will get back to you. Thanks so much for following along, and remember, if you cannot fly every day, then fly8mikealpha.com. We'll see y'all in the next one.